Hello, my knitting friends. Finally, the time has come that I'm going to show you how to finish your gentleman cardigan and your Bella Ciao cardigan. Many of you have requested a tutorial how to seam and set in the sleeve for both cardigans. And here we go. Let me show you. I've knitted up a little sample for you, half the size of the cardigan. This is half of the back. You can see here side seams, armhole, shoulder, and back neck. The construction of both of the cardigans, it's called English tailoring. That means that the shoulder seam is slightly off the center of your shoulder and moves towards the back. And this happens like this. This is the front, half of the front. And let me show you. If I put it next to the back, you'll see that the front is about this much longer than the back. And the reason for it is, if you attach the front to the back seam, it folds like this and then comes over like this. Sorry, this goes, now I folded the wrong way. Sorry, that's the way it goes. And this goes in the back. And therefore, you get this slight angle and your seam is on the back. But I'm going to show you how to seam it. And then you'll see the full details. Okay, let's begin. I have also a little shoulder cap knitted for you. You can see half just the shoulder cap, just in order to demonstrate you how that works. Okay, now we see this is the shoulder in the pattern. The shoulder seam starts where you begin your decreases. You can see this. These are the decreases for the shoulder. And in the pattern, I will tell you exactly where that happens and where to put an open marker. So you can mark this part where your shoulder is going to be attached to. It starts here. And this has to come here. This is for the shoulder. This is the bound off edge, and this is the side, my so-called garter stitch, edge stitch. Garter stitch I show you because I've knitted every first and last stitch, and this creates these little bumps. And these little bumps are super helpful because, you know, sometimes when you measure, and you think, oh, this is going to be, let's say, 4 inches. And then you knit up your second piece and you think this is 4 inches too. But maybe you just took measurements really sloppy and all of a sudden this is longer. And what the knotted edge does, I know this is going to be, let's say, 20 stitches, edge stitches. So you just count the little knots, and then you'll do the same thing on the other side, and you have the exact same edge stitches, so you can easily sew them together. So let's start with our shoulder seam. And therefore I need, and in this tutorial, I'm going to use some contrasting yarn. To measure your yarn, it should be about 3 or 4 times the width of the seam. So I think if I cut it here, this will be sufficient enough. Take my darning tapestry needle, should be a blunt tapestry needle. I'm gonna thread it. And the first thing is we close the shoulder seam so we can set in the sleeve afterwards. Let me show you. You start by using the first stitch at the very edge. I'm starting here. You line up your 2 pieces. This is the shoulder. and this is the bound off edge. And then grab these two legs at the very edge of your fabric. I'm gonna thread it through, leaving a tail to weave in ends. And then I start at the very edge at the neck and pick up the first knot and pull it through. Then I'm going to take, you see, these for the next stitch, these two legs, you know, the stitch is like these two V's, and so I'm going to pick it up. I usually don't like to pick up those, the bound off stitches, because they tend to move half a stitch off than the regular stitches, because I like it when I pick up those stitches that they really line up across. So I take those two legs, pull it through, and then just for this, for the shoulder seam, I pick up the thread between two. There's a knot and there's a knot, and I pick up the stitch between, because here we have to make sure that this fits into this. So I pick up the thread, take from the purl ridge the two legs, pull it through, pick up the next knot, pick up the two legs of the V, pull the yarn through, pick up the two threads between the two knots, pull the yarn through, pick up the next two legs. It's almost a little bit like mattress stitch or a regular shoulder seam. Then I'm going to pick up the knot, the next stitch from the purl ridge, the two, take up the yarn in between the two knots, next stitch, and pick up the knot from our garter stitch edge. And I keep on going in that fashion, as you can see. Here we go. Get the thread in between the both legs. And this is going to give us a nice and sturdy edge. And certain projects, because a lot of people keep asking me, why don't you do it top down and so on? And I think certain projects, they deserve seams in order to keep the shape and the fabric in place. Because when you knit top down and maybe you're using an alpaca yarn and the yarn gives in, and all it does, it gets longer and the shape doesn't stay. So especially if it's something tailored like the Bella Ciao cardigan where you have a little waistline integrated, you want that shape and you don't want to lose it. So in order to keep it, that's why side seams are so important. Here you go. You see, while I'm talking, I'll keep on working my stitches and my knots and my stitches and the thread in between, just to make sure that this piece fits on the shoulder. Okay, here I have another knot, two legs in between, two legs and the knot. So now the magic moment happens when you pull it. Can you see it? how even the contrasting yarn disappears, and all you're left with is a beautiful seam. Of course, when you pull it apart, you can see the little white dots, but on your project, I suppose you're going to use the same yarn as your project to sew it in. So, voila, that's the first step in our project. Then we'll need our shoulder cap. And I told you in the pattern, you put beginning of the shoulder, you put a marker, and when you knit the armhole, at a certain point, I tell you to put a marker as well, because these both places indicate where your shoulder cap sits. And see, this is the exact distance for the shoulder cap. And therefore, I've been a bit sloppy with yarn, as you can tell. It's a lot of yarn. I'm just going to cut it, but there's nothing worse than not enough yarn. So I just cut it because we don't, usually you weave in the ends, of course, so they're safe, but for the sake of demonstration, I'll just cut them because we're not going to wear it. If you want to sew in the shoulder cap, the trick is 3 times the length of the shoulder cap, and then just gonna unwind it, cut it, and thread the yarn through my needle. Make sure you have enough yarn, not too much so you get confused, but I'm gonna thread it. So now we're gonna split the yarn almost in half, because we want to leave a tail to finish this side and a tail to sew in this part. So we don't have to start here and go all around. We start here, go this way, and we go that way. That way it's much easier. So, and for the sake of demonstration, I turn it around. For me, it's much easier that way. You can see whatever way you prefer, but we have to start at this marker. So I'm going to put my needle through, take off the marker, and I'm going to pull the needle at the very end of the shoulder cap. By the way, right side is always facing you. So we're working from the outside, actually the public side, as you may say. So I make sure that I have enough yarn for this side, and I leave a tail for this side. So I'm starting, I'm going to turn it a little bit, and here we go. It's the same situation here. I have a bound off edge, and I have these little garter bumps. And I'm going to attach this to the garter bumps from here to there. So I pulled my yarn through. Next thing, I'm going to pick the next garter bump, pull the yarn through. In the beginning, you have a long loose ends. Pull it through. Take the 2 legs of the next stitch on your shoulder cap, pull the yarn through, take the next garter bump, pull the yarn through, the next 2 legs underneath your bound off edge, pull it through, get the next, and it's very mechanical. You just take 1 bump for 1 stitch. Take the next stitch from the V, 2 legs, pull it through, get the next garter bump, pull it through, next 2 legs, pull the yarn, sorry, I just bumped into, pull the yarn through, get the next garter bump, pull it through, get the next two legs, pull the yarn through, get the next garter bump. You see, it's very easy. It's almost like paint by numbers. Like get the next, and in your pattern, the amount of bound of stitches matches the exact garter bumps. Let's say you have 9 stitches, you have 9 garter bumps to attach it to. It's very easy. So I pull it through, but take your measurements from the pattern, from the gentleman cardigan or the Bella Ciao cardigan or any other English tailoring. You can use it on your own projects too. It's quite easy. Pull it through, and I'm almost at the very end. There's one more here. And I get the very last. And I go through the very last garter bump. Pull it through. Now, for the big magic, take off the marker. And now you can, and this is my favorite moment, I have to say, when I pull it through and see how beautifully this disappears. And it's seamless, basically. So now, here comes the fun part, because from now on, we only need to attach garter bump to garter bump, which is quite easy. Take the next garter bump, corresponding on the other side. And this becomes really fun because there's no guessing and tweaking and so on. As you can see, this is my very end, which I was too lazy to sew it in. Forgive me. Okay, the next bump. So. And ideally, from the shoulder to the cast on or bound off edge here, it should be the same amount of garter bumps of rows as on your shoulder cap. So basically you don't even have to think about it. So because they have the exact same row number. But in case you have more rows on this side or on the other side, it's always good to start at the top and move your way down, because if there's a little bit, there 1 or 2 rows more or 3, you can fudge it in under your arm and nobody will notice, so you don't have to, so you have a perfect shoulder, and then if there's anything to fudge, you kind of put it underneath and nobody will ever see it. But as you see, I go quickly, and this is really fun, I think. Takes away the whole fear of sewing, because this is usually why people always tell me, oh, I don't like it, it's so difficult and I don't know how to do it. I think the reason for it being is you have to prepare yourself. And I think the perfect edge stitch is the solution, because I know exactly. You'll see it better when we finish the side seams. It's just foolproofed. Let me pull it through. And it's really, you don't have to think. And it makes it, especially in fisherman or in brioche stitch, it leaves a beautiful edge, because the way what we're doing right now with the garter bumps creates a beautiful seam that looks exactly like, we have this brioche rows and then we have these pearl ridges, and the seam creates a pearl ridge, so it looks seamless. You have 2 brioche stitches and then you have this beautiful pearl ridge, which is the seam and makes it look so beautiful. As you see, there is no guessing, skip another stitch, or it's super easy. And of course, in your project, there will be a little bigger shoulder cap, but it's easy. So I'm almost at the end. Let's see, I'll finish this. In between, I'm just gonna pull a little bit to keep up the magic. Can you see how beautiful that is? And of course, don't mind the white little dots because of the contrast yarn, but you can see how beautiful and how flat it really lays. There's no bulky seam. And I'm going to show you the other side. And let me just count. Like I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is the 6 here. And now we have 5 left on both sides, which I think is fantastic because in our little example, there is no fudging involved because it fits. It's almost like top-down knitting in the round because it matches. And that's the nice thing about knitting with seams and knitting flat, because sometimes you have complicated, intriguing patterns on the back, on the front, cables. And I sometimes find it so overwhelming when you have to concentrate on different patterns and then you have to make your decreases. I think it's sometimes overwhelming. And then once you made a mistake in the back, you have to rip apart the whole piece. And if you knit in pieces, the worst that can happen is you have to rip down one piece. See, now we're finished and it's an exact match. Now we have this little corner here, and usually the sock knitters of you know this little problem, or when you even top down raglan, there's always this little hole, and the same thing over here. So what I do, and this is my kind of fudging because there's no rule how you do it, but I see this big hole and then I try out, okay, which stitch or which do I have to pick in order to close it? And there's this one and this one. So I'm going just to close that little gap. And on this other side, the same thing. There's this one, the thread, and there's this one. I'm going to go through and pull it, voila, the gap is closed. And now, this is the easy part, we just have to close the bound off edges. And there I go just like I take these 2 legs of the stitch. On the opposite side I do the same thing. From the V. Now I go in between. Two. Here we go. It's from the purl stitch, but it has the other, because it's a knit stitch on this side and the purl stitch, but it also has like these 2 little legs. I'm going to grab those. And we're almost there. The last one on this side. And here you go. Close it. Here, the edge stitch. Pull it through. And this is so satisfying. Okay, we finished this side. We got some leftover tail. I mean, you can keep this tail. I usually weave it in because we have to finish the side seam, but I usually prefer, in order to get it perfect, I'll start from the bottom and go up. I usually don't go from under the arm downwards because sometimes, I mean, I told you this is going to be the exact size, but if you kind of messed it up and the other side is quite a bit longer, you know, you have to fudge at the very end, and we want these seams to be flawless. So if we ever have to fudge, we want to do it under the arm. So I'm going to leave this, I'm going to cut it. Of course, you should leave it as long to weave in the ends, but we don't have to weave in the ends because we're just learning how to sew it in, so this is not important. I turn my work around and I do the same thing on the other side. And now you realize the whole construction when you see it like this, because this part, the shoulder cap, is exactly the part which is longer than the back. So these, let's say, this might be 2 inches. These 2 inches are the exact 2 inches that the front part is longer than the back part. So this creates the shoulder cap, and this is the exact size from here to here as this part. So no magic. I'm gonna thread this again, and off we go. Take the knot on this side, on the other side, next one here, next one up here, next one up here. It's almost like a mantra. You're doing the same thing all over and over again. This is my favorite way. And you can do it, of course, garter stitch and fisherman's rib have the exact same gauge, so they match perfect. Because 2 rows of garter stitch are also 2 rows of brioche or fisherman rib, so you don't have to worry. This matches the exact gauge, so you don't have to, as I said, skip 3, take 3, skip 1, take 3, skip 1. You just go on knot to knot. And this is really foolproofed, like idiots, like Elizabeth Zimmerman. She called, that's what I heard, the rumor has it, that she called the I-cord because it's called the idiot chord. So sounds so professional when we say I-cord, but instead it just means the idiot chord. So can you see this is the magic again? Ta-da! We're almost finished. The last stitches. By the way, let me know in the comments your how you think about side seams, seaming, top-down knitting. What's your fear? Why you're not into it? I would really love to hear your experience. And maybe let me know after you're finished your Bella Ciao or your gentleman cardigan, how it worked out, if this helped you to finish it. Because for me, it's like second nature. And sometimes when you write down a pattern, you think, oh my God, closing the seams, that's nothing. But I learned better. So that's why I give you my in-depth tutorial. So. Okay, pull it through, ta-da. But the thing is, make sure that you don't pull too hard because then it puckers up and we don't want that. Last one here. So, same spot again. We want to close that little gap here. Take these 2 legs, one from here, one from there, close it. Well, sometimes you have to play it by ear. This is my favorite, like when there's no rule how to close a hole or a gap. Sometimes you just have to fiddle around, but you definitely don't want to leave a big gap like this. So I'm taking this thread and the corresponding thread, pull it through. You can see I'm pulling it and it's gone. All there's left are these 2 bound off edges from the arm and the side piece, the front. picking those 2 threads, going through, taking the pearl column, these 2 threads, pull it through, pearl here, the threads, the brioche or the fisherman's rib, pull it through and close this. And this is so rewarding. We'll finish this. Pull it more tight. In the end, you don't see this, the white spots, because they will completely disappear because I assume you're going to knit it in one color and you use the same color. For demonstration purposes, I used a different color for each piece. And look how beautiful this looks from the inside. You don't have a bulky seam. It's completely flat. You turn your work around. We fold it. You can see this fits, and all we have to do is to close the side seam. And then, as I told you, I'm going to cut this yarn because I want to work from the bottom up. In the end, your sleeve, of course, will be longer, and you'll have to close the underarm. But same here, I'd like to start from the beginning and move my way up, because in case I have to fudge a little bit, I'd like to do it under the arm. And since I have still enough yarn left, I'm going to close this with this leftover yarn. So I'm going to, one thing I wanted to show you when you pick up all these pearl bombs, I take my knitting needle, a sock needle, and can you see how easily it slips through all the garter stitch bombs? And in case you wanted to knit in the opposite direction, or there's another video how to attach an I-cord, because for both of the cardigans, for the Bella Ciao cardigan and for the gentleman cardigan, on the inside of the side, the fronts, you're going to attach an I-cord. And basically this is how you attach an I-cord to the side, because you're using all the stitches and you start knitting. But this is just off track a little bit. So now we want to close these 2 seams. And the important thing is to start really at the very bottom, because we want to line these 2 these 2 edges so they're on the same level, and then they don't get askew like this, or we just want them to be really straight. Okay, let's go. Picking up the very bottom stitch on this side and on the other side. Of course, you're leaving a little tail to weave in the ends later on, and then we go. Off we go again. 1 and 1. It's the same principle as we did for the sides of the arm cap. And this, for me, this is something, you knit up your cardigan and then it sits all these different pieces forever in your basket because you're too lazy, or the fear of sewing, and you're like, oh my God, no, I don't want to do it because I'm going to mess it up. No. Grab your needles and off you go. It's really that easy. And the good thing, because that's what I like about all my new techniques when I acquire something, it gives me so much more power over my knitting, that whenever I create my own project, I can decide, do I want to knit it in pieces? Do I want to knit it in the round? I'm not depending on the designer telling me what I have to do, because I am in charge of my patterns. And I think that's very important, because knitting is one thing we like it, but I think you have to be at a certain level also be able to finish a project, to sit down and know all the techniques that are out there. I think this gives you the freedom and then you can say, I am a good knitter because, I mean, we know how to pull a loop through with the needle, but in the end, to know how to finish a project, I think this is very, very satisfying. And I totally understand. I mean, I love my top-down projects as well, but sometimes I think, especially if we are going for a fitted garment, I think it's very important the seams are there to stabilize the shape, and that's the reason why there are seamstresses and certain items are seamed, because the industry definitely could do more seamless garments, but they on purpose they do. Can you see how beautiful this is again? Sorry, I'm keep on bragging about the beauty of this, but I think it's so surprising. We're nearing the end, and it's going to be fabulous, I promise you, when you try it. Just stare, or you just try when you, this is another thing I always like to do whenever I do a gauge swatch. I try to use all my new techniques at the gauge swatch, so knit up two swatches and then try to sew them together. You know, it's sometimes so easy, you don't have to wait for a full-on project. So here you go. Oh, we're almost there. This is paradise, knitting paradise. And I know you're applauding already, but as you can see, it's a complete match. And just so I pull through. And this is it. I think it's fantastic. And just for the sake of it, because I have a little thread left over, I'm just gonna finish this. Bump and bump. Bump. Here you go. Get this. Get this. I know it looks almost too good to be true, what I'm doing right now, but that's the way it is. Last one, pulling through. So, and of course, weave in the ends, but we skip that. Now I'm going to show you. Ta-da! It all fits. And turn around, and here you can see the beauty of the English tailoring, because this sits on the back without this, of course. And I show you the other side. Welcome to the other side. Also very important. And be honest, you could wear it this way too. This is, I hope you like it. I hope you get through all these different little steps, but I wish you luck and be happy when you do it. And maybe you want to check out my patterns, the Bella Ciao cardigan and the Gentleman cardigan. They're both finished in the same technique. They're fun to knit and they're definitely fun to wear. Find the pattern link, the link to the pattern down below in the description. Thank you very much.